Hi. Well, welcome everyone. I'm really pleased to welcome our guest today. Firstly, I'm Simon Bliss, Chairman of Team, and I have with me today Alex Arnott, who's a hugely reputable and well-known player in the marketplace as a board advisor, mentor, and NED to recruitment companies that have real ambition for growth. Um, Nurture and develop that growth and in many cases have an event at the end, and you've supported many successful businesses, not only in the growth stage but the positioning stage for sale, and also manage the exit process as well. So fantastic that we reconnected after so many years. You helped me when I was growing Principal People with some key elements of things I should watch out to guide my business on its growth stage, and really appreciate that. We hooked up again at the REC conference with our friends at the REC, and was really good that it was timely that we get back together. And really thank you for your time today, Alex, and presenting
My
to our
pleasure.
members. Yeah,
My
we've
pleasure.
got quite a few of our members on board and some guests as well. So welcome to our guests. I'm gonna throw the show open to you. Jahisha will get your slides up, and what we'll do at the end, folks, if you've got some key questions throughout the session, please use the comments best to join the chat. Fire some questions at Alex. We'll do those at the end through Q&A, and I'll manage those for you. But the floor is yours, Alex, and very welcome to the team live session. All the
Thank you
best.
very much, Simon. It's my pleasure to be here, and thank you everyone for joining us. So if I could have the slides, please. Thank you. So as I say, thanks for joining us this afternoon. This is obviously the subject, and I'm going to go into detail about what we're going to be covering shortly. Fundamentally, it's around every recruitment company, the things that they should be doing to be more successful in their growth journey, actually, even regardless if they ever want to exit in the future. So even if you're just building something that's more of a lifestyle business, so much of this content is going to be relevant for you. But particularly so if you would like to ideally achieve some kind of event in the future, whether that's a sale, a trade sale, private equity, MBO, partial MBO, EOT for people who are aware of them. There's many different ways of doing it. But all of these things are relevant about actually growing a more successful recruitment company along the journey. So where do you start with this? The fact is that successful exits don't happen by chance. They take time and effort. And actually, a lot of people make the mistake of they wake up one day and go, oh, do you know what? I fancy selling the company. I'm going to do that within a year. They've been growing the business for 5-10 years at that point, and then suddenly they come to that realization for all sorts of different reasons. The problem with that is too late to start making a big difference to get to the really big successful top of market valuations, the types where you get multiple people who are interested in buying your business. So actually, you want to start the process as soon as possible. Someone very famously said, when's the best time to start the exit process? Well, it's today, and if it's not today, it's tomorrow. So all these things I'm going to be talking about are things, actionable things you can put into practice straight away, which will actually make a difference in the success of your business in the short term, the medium term, and hopefully the long term if you want to make an event. And one of my roles as a board advisor, non-exec, is to put people like yourself in a position where you've got the options. And one of those options could be a sale. So a lot of these things obviously going to be relevant for that as well. Now, you may think it's obvious that I'm going to say it's never too early to get in the right advice. But of course, why would you not want to learn from others? And I would suggest that 95% of all mistakes in business have been made thousands of times by thousands of other founders. So if you can go seek out those people who've been through the journey that either you're going through or about to go through, then you can learn from the mistakes they've made so you don't have to make them. Avoid those costly errors, the timely errors, the stress that you could get from these particular errors that you're just about to do that other people have already made. And of course, learn from the successes, the shortcuts, the cheat code, if you like, to what's made them successful. So in this 45-minute session from my side, we have a Q&A at the end. I'm going to cover what I believe are the top 10 deal breakers that slow growth and stop future exits, as well as the top 10 deal makers that help you to accelerate growth and have buyers fighting over you. And of course, the key part to that, and something that I'm a bit of an expert on, Frank, my track record, is delivering top of market exits, not just any old exits and ones where you've been screwed over, but where you're in a position of strength, better deal structures. Typically, that means you get more paid up front and less on earnouts, because obviously that's more risky for you. So let's get into the detail, because we've got a lot to cover, and this time is going to fly by. So let's start with looking at the 10 common reasons why recruitment companies don't scale and founders don't achieve their exit objective. Because if you can look at these things first, look at all of the problems, then of course you start finding solutions, you can do something about it. So these are in no particular order, but they're going to give you a few ideas. So first of all, that there isn't any or not enough guaranteed revenue within your business. Now, some of you might be perm only, and we'll talk about that shortly. But if you can get some kind of recurring revenue, future revenue, for example, contractor revenue or temp or freelance, etc., or a permanent subscription model. For those of you who don't know much about that, I'm going to talk a bit more about that later. A fundamentally contractually obliged business, because that's removing the risk for a future person buying a company. But it's also important on the way, because if you've got guaranteed income, of course, it lessens the risk of you getting bad months. From a cash flow perspective, it can be useful, but also from a growth perspective, because if you've got guaranteed income coming in, then you are more happy to reinvest for growth, and therefore you're likely to get a faster acceleration in your business. But as I say, even if you're perm only, and I sit on about 25 boards of recruitment companies, so I see everything from contract, temp, perm, search, retained, etc. And some people have a hybrid. There are ways in most recruitment companies of getting some kind of guaranteed income. So again, we'll come back to that. Other issues are lack of consistent growth. So that classic sort of Manhattan skyline, great year, great quarter, bad quarter. That looks risky from a buyer's perspective. So if you can get more consistent growth, albeit even if it's slightly slower growth, then of course things are going in the right direction, and that always makes a promising sign. The business is too reliant on the founders. I had this one recently with a company, actually previously tried to go to market to be bought, failed, got sent to me surprisingly, in only 6 months, I managed to turn them around, and then they actually got a successful event. That's how quickly things can be done if you know what you're doing. But the point being is that it was too reliant on the founders of the business, and so the people looking to buy them said that that was too risky. That leads to other issues about longer earnouts and other things as well. But it was a deal breaker in this case, so we had to do something about it. There's too much risk, and it's all about risk when either you're growing a company and or having an event at the end. For example, in inexperienced leadership, again, another one that I'm going through at the moment, with developing the senior leadership team to be ready for that. But in one case, the leadership team was too inexperienced, and it came up in the due diligence process. So obviously something had to be done about that. Your company is not easily scalable. There's no cookie cutter processes. If you've got a business that just does things slightly chaotically, then what happens if you're not there, or you want to leave the business quite quickly post an event, or along the journey, if you or another key person isn't available because they get metaphorically run over by a bus, or they're sick or not available, or they leave the company, and you don't have scalable processes, it's very hard to replicate. It makes things a lot more difficult for you and or someone in the future. Too few clients. Obviously, if you've got too much reliance on too few clients, that's a risk. Not enough proof of scale pre and post event. Now, pre-event is obviously showing that you've got the scale within a market and your niche and wherever you're working. And that's great. A lot of people have that. But the thing that people forget about is post-event. I'm not going to give you millions or tens of millions for your business if I can't get a 5, 10, 15 times return afterwards. So if you're going to say to me that the reason why this company is worth X is because you can take what we do into other geographical areas or international expansion or into other skill sets. And I'm going to go, well, what proof have you got? And you've got, well, we've only done 2 placements into the US, for example, or 2 placements in the South or the North. That's not enough proof. And if you can't show the scale for a post an event and enough proof that you've already broken into that scale, then that makes it a real risk for me, and it can be a real deal breaker. And I had, again, a company that was sent to me, very strong in the local region, very proud that they had 60% saturation in their market, but no one wanted to buy them. Why? Because they had no proof of scale into other areas, and there wasn't much growth within that local region for them. So other areas, the too reliant on too few billers is a key one that I hear a lot. You might get one person who's doing 350, 500,000, and everyone else is doing 100,000. And that's a very risky view for a buyer, and as it is for you growing the company. There's a lack of enough business winners. I'd say especially right now, this has become even more critical in the current market. The rise of internal talent teams and the internal sophistication. Obviously AI now, and the pressure from companies through internal talent teams to utilize more AI tools. So the business winning ability is absolutely essential, and to be able to prove that you're able to do that is a critical thing. The average billings per head or per team are too low. I had, again, with one company, they've been going for about 20 years in recruitment. They've got about 20, 25 fee earners. Their average billings per head was around about 10 grand per month. So it was okay, nothing special. But they wanted to grow, they wanted to exit. Either that meant they had to hire loads of people, which is very difficult in the current market, or they needed to get their billings per head up. They told me in the previous 20 years they'd never been above 10 grand per head. It was never going to happen. Within 12 months, I managed to help them get up to £17,500 per head. So again, things can be done if you know what you're doing, but it's one of those key areas to look at. It could be you've got the wrong or no business plan and a declining market. Again, I've talked before about why it might be declining. Could be there's a failure to increase revenue, profit, and headcount at the same time. It's what I call the holy trinity of recruitment. If you can do those three things at the same time in a positive direction, you're in a good position. And finally, and this can be a common one, unrealistic founder valuations. Quite often, for whatever reason, founders have this view of what their business is worth, and it doesn't matter what you think it's worth. It's what buyer thinks it's worth, and obviously that's a critical bit. Okay, so now we've looked at, if you like, all of the issues, we'll now start looking at some of the solutions. So I'm going to share my top 10 tips when growing a recruitment company, and what I believe are the 10 vital questions you need to ask yourself after this session. Now, due to the time that we've got, I'll share just a few key points for each of these 10 to get you started and to get you thinking, rather than an exhaustive list. However, this is an absolute critical warning for you here. Do not be fooled by going, oh, we're already doing this. Oh, we're already doing that. First of all, are you doing it? And really, and are you doing it consistently? And secondly, and this is the critical bit, is can they be improved? And again, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. Okay, so these again are not in any specific order, so don't think that number one is the most important. I'm just going to share 10 key points with you. So planning and consistency. So what do I mean about this? Because this isn't a 60-page document. You know, you're not necessarily looking to raise investment and you've got to come up with tons and tons of information. What you want is a line in the sand. Now, through experience, and I've done hundreds of recruitment strategy sessions. So I'd like to think that alongside the 27 exits that I've done, which are for, 40 odd plus founders who've sold for millions or tens of millions, that, there's some good knowledge within this here. Anything beyond 3 years is too far away. Things change too much, particularly in the current market. Anything less than 3 years is too short term. So you want to put a line in the sand, and you want to build the business on paper of what you want it to achieve. What is that objective at that point? So let me just give a quick working example. You might say, I want to get to the magic million. I want £1 million net profit business. Great. So what does it need to look like? What's the org chart? Who are the people I need? What are the divisions they're in? What's their specialism? What are the financial plans that we need behind that? What's the cash flow we need to do to achieve that? How many clients do we need, etc. And then you start reverse engineering that process. So now you've got the next 12 months, month by month milestones across those key areas. And so every single month in your board meetings or senior management meetings, you can start ticking off and making sure that you've delivered that bite-sized chunk towards an overall goal. By having the 3-year plan, it means you're more likely to be making better decisions today, tomorrow, next month, and next quarter, rather than doing things that feel right, And then in 3 years' time, you look back and go, why the hell did we do that? Why did we do that? It was never going to achieve our £1 million net profit we wanted to do. So it's a critical part of the process. I'm slightly obsessed with what I call the 3 Ps, that's people, planning, and process. And planning here is one of those absolute critical parts to successful companies that get successful growth and successful events at the end of it. And that monthly accountability is really critical. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. And behind all of this, you then want the data, the ratios, the activities you need to achieve the target. So you reverse engineer the company from a strategic viewpoint, high level, and then you reverse engineer it into the individual teams, managers, and recruiters and what they need to be doing at their core part of it. I'm a massive believer if you can get every single component within a company, i.e. all the recruiters, 360, 180, managers, etc., if everyone does their piece of the jigsaw, and that's a small little a monthly amount, added together, it makes big things happen, and it's a critical part of building up the process, and it's a key part of the the companies that I advise and have advised that have been super successful. And that consistency behind everything is really important. There's nothing more annoying to me as a board advisor than when I hear founders or directors say things like, "Oh, we would have hit target if it wasn't for that one placement." It's like, it's just leaving things to chance. You've just got to give yourself building headroom to this data, to these milestones, to this process, so you always hit target or get above target. I guess the question, as you can see here, is that, do you have a plan, and have you communicated it and to your team? And is your plan done in the way that I've described? Some people have a version of this plan, but it's not as detailed as what I've said, and that's the critical part of combining it. So again, if we've got any questions at the end, I will deal with that. So number 2, this is my concept. I have created this. I call it recruitment in a box. So let me give you a quick example. If you're looking to buy a property and you go into the first room and you see a crack in the ceiling, what do you think? You think the rest of the property, I'm going to start looking at really, really carefully. This is like buying a company. So when I go in to buy a company and to analyze it, if I start seeing little cracks all over the place, then I start really doing in-depth due diligence. What you want to do is to get everything done, all your ship in order. And if you can minimize the risk, the cracks in this case, you're going to maximize the value of your company. Now, there are about 16 key areas, or pillars as I call them, that are essential to growing a great recruitment company. So I'll give you some examples. One might be client account winning, one might be account development, one might be hiring recruiters, one might be finance and operations, one might be around rewards, internal rewards, one might be around marketing, etc., etc. And your job is to review each of those 16 areas, probably every 6 months. And I get everyone involved in the company as part of this process, because my view on life is everyone knows things I don't know, and I know things that they don't know. So the more people I get involved in this, the more likely I am to get great ideas. Plus, you get great buy-in from the team. Everyone's involved in Project X, which is, growing the company. So you review these 16 core areas. Your job is to look at what's happened historically, what you've done well, what you could do better, make recommendations on how to improve them, and then turn it into a process. So that becomes now the cookie cutter. That becomes that if someone is sick or run over by a bus or someone buys you, that you don't need to be there. They can just go into the system and go, right, hiring someone in the business, this is how company X does it. A, B, C, and D. Simple processes. Some people do it as diagrams and workflows, but one pager. So it's simple to follow how we do every single part of this business. Now, imagine that. Not only have you now got the people in your business bought into growing every single part of it, but every single 6 months, you're constantly looking to review every part of your business, looking for wins and gains. So your company will get better and deliver better results today, tomorrow, next month, and next year, regardless of whether you sell in the future or not. The spin-off of that, though, is that by doing it, you obviously build a more successful company that has more value and it has less risk in it. So you tend to get better top-of-market multiples at the end of it because of these processes that you put in place. It is never too early to start this process. And then what I do So I build that into board meetings. We've got a project management program that says, here's the 16 things we're looking at. You don't do it all at once. You do it in priority order over a year, and then you tick off those things just to make sure you're ahead of the curve. So, I said, have you done this here? Well, the chances are you haven't, because it's a process that I've invented. However, the concept you might be using, something to put in place, can make a big difference. Move on, number 3, key people. So attracting more quality people sounds obvious, but do you have a separate strategy just for this? Have you literally brain dumped all the specific ways that you could find great people to come and join your company? When you interview people, are you constantly asking for them, how did they find their job, where they're at, whether they're in recruitment or outside recruitment? Always in sponge mode, always looking for clever ideas. And if people have been attracted to some really big firms, because that was a candidate, for example, that you're interviewing, learn from them as well, because those big firms spend millions of pounds on attracting people. So we can constantly absorb great ideas from all these different companies to make your strategy better. But you need someone to be focused on that and to be accountable. And accountability is my absolute buzzword in driving successful companies, particularly recruitment companies. So having someone accountable for going, right, we're going to make this a strategy, whether you've got a full-time internal recruiter, a part-time internal recruiter, or it's just you doing it yourself, just make sure you've got that brain dump, always looking to improve your ways of bringing key people into your company. And, do you have the right people in your company to achieve your plan? Now, by definition, the right person means they are driving your plan. So if you have a plan that isn't being driven by others, then I'd argue that if you haven't shared the plan with them, you haven't given them the opportunity to do that, or they aren't the right people, in which case you have to consider looking outside your business or developing the people you've got within your company. And then that nice segue into what development do existing staff need, constantly looking to improve all of your people across all the different areas, whether that's recruitment skills, sales skills, candidate skills, negotiation skills, management skills, etc., etc. And again, I'm going to talk a bit more about that in another slide shortly. So the last part of it, of course, is to tie in key people. Now, some people have a share scheme, an EMI scheme, for example. Some people have meritocratic career structures, in terms of if you do this, you get promoted, and everyone knows what that is. But some people, share scheme, for example, might feel like jam tomorrow. They've got no control over it. You may or may not decide to sell your company. So having a revenue scheme alongside the share scheme, for me, does both jobs. So as an example, I might say that we put X percentage of profit into a pot every single year. And then in 3 years' time, as long as everyone hits their individual targets, they all then get a chunk of money at that point from the revenue pot. And then, so that ties people in for 3 years. And then you release that 50% of whatever the bonus is 6 months after that point, and 6 months after that. You now tie people in for 4 years. So it's less likely you to lose those individuals, and they're more likely to be motivated along the way. And of course, it's something that they can control, whereas a share scheme, they don't have as much control. So it deals with both people. Some people like the feeling of having ownership of the company. That's great. So you deal with both sides. So the question is, do you have a succession plan for every key person within your company? Absolutely essential. We went to number 4. So this is arguably the biggest thing, as I've said here, that increases value multiplier and the pool of buyers likely to be in you. And therefore, you're going to get a stronger position for negotiation, which is guaranteed income. We talked a little bit about it earlier. It de-risks bad months, gives confidence for you to accelerate growth. But I also talked about this perm only side. So for those of you who aren't using a subscription model, and I sit on the board of a bunch of tech companies, so I've probably put in about 17 perm only subscription models into recruitment companies I advise now. And to be fair, that they have been game changing because they've really helped. I understand there are some of you, it's just impossible. You must try whatever it is. But if a client has a certain amount of hires per year on a permanent side, so I just pick a random number, they hire 10 people a year, and each invoice is £8,000 for argument's sake. So there's £80,000 of fee. Rather than over the year them charging 80,000, you charge them, say, £6,000 a month. That's 72,000 obviously over the year. That's just saved them 8,000, 10%. So by definition, that's good for them. It's good for you because you've got guaranteed income coming in, and you will provide other value adds as part of that subscription model. So again, there's a whole process behind it. We haven't got time to talk about it now. And if anyone wants to talk about it, they can email me separately and we can have a one-to-one conversation. But do you have that expertise in-house, or do you need to get that expertise in? You should certainly be challenging your existing model to make sure that if you can get recurring revenue or forecasted revenue coming in, it's definitely something you should be looking at. Okay, so now moving on to PSLs and contracts. So having clients contractually tied in is absolutely an essential part of getting a great deal in the future. But obviously, it's useful for you in the meantime because you've got that guaranteed income, cutting out the competition, etc., etc. But the question, I guess, is it worth trying to get your clients to sign up to a multi-year contract by offering them a slight discount? Now, I'm not saying do it. What I'm saying is you should challenge yourself from a commercial perspective, because if you're getting to a point of certainly an event, then if a client, a buyer knows that you've got a bunch of clients who are contractually obliged beyond an event for a couple of years, it's less risky for them. Therefore, you don't necessarily have to have such an amount being paid on your earnout, because obviously it's less risky for them. So they don't need to tie you in for longer to see what the results are going to be. So it's well worth considering. And then, underneath all of that, you've got things like mini PSLs, mini RPOs. So it's just tying people in, but that the words are contractually obliged. We don't want people saying things like, oh, we've got a bit of a kind of a gentleman's agreement on the situation, or oh yeah, but they've given us all the recruitment every year for the last 10 years. That means nothing to a buyer. They're only interested in things which are contractually obliged in writing. So they're the things you really want to make sure that you're getting into your business, making sure that one person is accountable for maximizing revenue across all of these accounts, and making sure it happens is obviously a very useful tool. And then the final point I've got in here is around A, B, and C clients. So what I mean by that is that when you look at all the companies you've done business with, they're probably not all exactly the same in terms of revenue and the quality of the clients. So what you do is you put them like this. I've got my A ones, the best ones, my B are the next ones, C are the next. ADP is a great tool that I've developed, which again, if people want to talk to me afterwards, they can ask me about it, which helps people to take an account from a C or a B towards an A. You're always moving the dial to the right, where you're looking to increase revenue, increase the strength of the relationship. And I've developed a tool specifically for this to help people focus on it and make sure it's a key part of your business and a focus of your business. So again, who is accountable for reviewing all your clients and trying to turn as many from C to B to A as much as possible and maximize the revenue in every single one of companies you're already dealing with, rather than it always having to come from new accounts. Right, number 6, more recruiters, less risk. So if you've got too few recruiters in your company, it is seen as a risk. Now, a company might buy you because you've got a really good contract book, and so they've got some guaranteed income. But you're not going to get top of market if it's just a book they're buying, because they've got, if they've got a company and you've got forecasted revenue and guaranteed revenue coming in from other recruiters as you grow the company, that's going to make a huge difference going forward. And they're buying that expertise and knowledge as well. So if you're in single digits as a company in terms of recruiters, fee earners, then that is quite risky. And to be frank, it's kind of seen as a desk, regardless of whether they do different desks or not. It's kind of seen as a desk. And if 2, 3, 4 people leave, it's massively at risk. That's kind of half the business gone just like that. So ideally, if possible, you want to build into your plan, getting to at least double digits as a minimum. I mean, obviously, the bigger you are, the less risky it goes, but as a minimum. And then that puts it at a point where if 2 or 3 people left, it's seen as less risky. And therefore, you'll be in a stronger position in terms of people who are interested in buying you and getting a better deal. So have you got a talent plan in place? How many people do you need to achieve your objectives? Before, I just gave an example of that £1 million EBIT. It doesn't have to be that big, it can be less. But if it is £1 million, how many people in what positions do you need to get to that number? And build that org chart, reverse engineer it, and then that gives you the hiring strategy and the hiring plan, how many people you need to hire in priority order and when. And it may be that if you're hiring enough people during this time, that having an internal recruiter becomes cost effective, whether that's part-time or full-time. But it's, like as I said before, having that attraction and retention strategy, so adding retention in here as well, a brain dump, reviewing regularly, that's one of the 16 pillars within my recruitment in a box. So it's a key part of what you need to do. Okay, now, I'm sure many people have heard this before, the old inch wide, mile deep philosophy, but fundamentally, this is about sticking to your knitting. The further you move away from that, the less value it's going to be. And of course, it's harder for you to develop clients in a completely different area that you've got no experience of. So going for the path of least resistance, it's going to be less risky for you and, of course, a buyer. So when I'm thinking of de-risking or needing to grow into different areas for whatever reason, then I think like a Venn diagram. So think of the overlap. What's the nearest thing to what you do? If you're doing, education recruitment, and then you suddenly do technology recruitment, they're too distinct. No one's going to go, well, that's the perfect purchase for me. But if you're doing things which perhaps all within professional services, and there's an overlap there, then of course that then has more sense. There's more of a conversation. So make sure you just don't go chaotically into different markets just because an opportunity has come up. That might be good for the short term. It may be good for revenue and great for a lifestyle business, but it's no good necessarily for value and if you're trying to sell a company. So as I said earlier on, can you prove scale within your niche? And that key point again, what about post-event? It's going to be critical. People want to see a return if they're going to give you a lot of money. So increasing profit. So most obvious comment of the day award goes to me. However, what is good? Now, I put a number here. To be honest, there's varying degrees of response I could give to this. But if you can do 20% increases in profit each year on year, you're probably going in the right direction. Now, things can skew that. For example, if you've got a year of investment, you suddenly hired 6 people, your profits low that year, great, as long as you see the year of investment get the return next year and the years after, and then you're getting the 20% year on year increases. The other thing to consider here is around adjusted EBIT. So your actual profit number, if you're going to market, is not actually the profit number that you would get a valuation on. What you'll need to do is you'll need to remove any debt first. But you can also put some cost back into the business. One-off payments, for example, in some cases, if you've used a rec to hire someone, that was a one-off fee against that individual. So that can be put back in to the profit, which then obviously boosts your profit. So sometimes that 20% increase can happen with adjusted, even though it doesn't happen with the actual terms. But really, you want to think about it as any adjusted numbers being icing on the cake, because there's no guarantee that a buyer will agree to all the adjusted numbers that you put in. There's normally a bit of negotiation when that happens. So again, what's your strategy to increase fees and margins? There might be pressure on your business to go down currently. There normally is from clients. So what are you doing about bringing in new clients or new sectors and verticals which are going to push up that margin? Because a business where the fees and margins are going down year on year is not obviously a great buy. So you need to have a think about it strategically, again, years in advance of going to market. And obviously getting paid what you're worth. Avoid recruiting for free where possible. So what I mean by that clearly is contingency recruitment. Now, I know sometimes you have to do it, and sometimes you have to do it to prove yourself in the first place. But I'm a massive, massive advocate of retainers, or at least mini retainers. You and your team work bloody hard to get the fees, to find the candidates, to do the networking, to all your experience and knowledge and wisdom that you bring to the table. And I don't like the fact that if the average placement is 1 in 4 of the jobs that you fill, 1 in 3, that means you're wasting 75% or 66% of your time working for free. So that's not nice, I think. So I think there's a whole model here around mini retainers where even with a smaller financial commitment from them, it increases the rate of likelihood and fill rate. So it might then go from 1 in 4 to 1 in 3, 1 in 3 to 1 in 2. But you're getting paid at least for an element of your time. So I think that's something you should be challenging yourself about, how you can go about that in your market where possible. I know it's not always possible, but where possible. And a subscription model that I mentioned before. And so my question here is a monthly revenue team. So to explain what this is, what I do is I get a group of people every single month and I give them one challenge. That's it. I don't talk about anything else and they don't talk about anything else. I give them half an hour to 45 minutes away from the desk because they've got to have clear thinking time. And that challenge is the biggest problem that's stopping my business from increasing its revenue this month. So, for example, it could be that we are struggling to win new clients. It could be that we are struggling to get retainers. It could be we are struggling to hire experienced recruiters. Right, I'm going to put 2, 3, 4, 5 people in a room this month. I just want you to think about that, have half an hour, and at the end of it, I'll come back. A good way of doing it is obviously give people a couple of days in advance notice, tell them to come to the meeting with 1 or 2 ideas already thought through rather than put them on the spot. You'll get a better outcome. But every single month, it means you've just got the greatest minds in the business in the right environment trying to solve your number one challenge. So every single month, it could be a different challenge. Sometimes challenges keep recurring. It's a really, really good tool. I've seen that deliver some great results. So we're nearing the end, pleased to hear. So number 9, learning and development. As you can see, the child at the bottom of the stairs there. So it's a house of cards, isn't it? All businesses are a house of cards. They're built on the strong foundations. The stronger foundations, the better they are. So what are you doing to build those foundations? What do you currently provide? Most recruitment companies that I've seen, they either have training development at the start when someone joins you, and then typically maybe at manager level, even if they get management level. But the bit that they miss, and I'll give all the reasons behind it in a second, the bit that they miss are the recruiters between, say, 1 and 5 years experience who are up and running. They now know what they're doing. They're delivering some revenue, because if not, they wouldn't be with your business. However, they're at their most vulnerable because that's where everyone else wants them. And they're all being headhunted every single day and every single week by whoever's headhunting them. And that's the point they least get invested in. And the reason why they least get invested in, for 2 reasons. One, you've given them all your knowledge. It's hardly likely that someone's been with you for a year and what you've done is gone, haha, I've kept some secrets up my sleeve for them. I just wanted to hold them back. And now I'm going to suddenly tell them how to go from 150 to 300 or 300 to 600. You would have given them all those skills within those first 12 months. The other problem is that if you go externally to then get the knowledge through training or otherwise, the vast majority of people, not everyone, but the vast majority of people, they did recruitment years ago. So how can you have the credibility of them knowing what to do in the current market and how to take those people, double their billings, whatever they are, at a point where everyone else is trying to headhunt them? And let's be clear right now, if I could, everyone on this call, give you someone from your nearest competitor who's experienced and up and running and doing about 250 grand billing, and they wanted to join you for the right reason, you would snap my hand off. And this is what's going on right there, right now. And all of your people are now at risk. And very few people are doing anything about it for the reasons that I've said. Or where they do get investment in, it's not giving them the tools they need. Now, I've put here, there's a shameless plug. So hopefully I think it's fair in return for me spending my time now and giving you lots of ideas for free. Very, very briefly, I do run a big bit of coaching. I mentor £5 million billers myself in the current market, and I work with them at desk doing calls, the whole thing. So I know exactly what's going on right now and how to turn people from 150, 300, 300, 600, and 600, even north of that. So I won't say any more on it now, but anyone wants to talk about it, again, they can message me afterwards. But for you, the question you should be asking for now is, do you have an L&D plan for everyone in your company? And when I mean everyone, including those people in the middle as they continue with their career with you. Okay, so getting right towards the end now, brand building. Now, this is a whole seminar on its own, so I'm only going to sort of touch upon this very briefly. There are 5 marketplaces that you need to be considering when you are doing your marketing. The number 1 is internal communication, so your team and making them aware of what you're doing as a company and why it's a great place to be. Number 2 is potential buyers in the future, that they see that you're out there and they're kind of looking at you and doing their research, and they all have associates searching the market to see who's out there and out there a lot on LinkedIn, etc., and making a lot of noise. Number 3, potential recruiters who could join your company, experienced or rookies, to make it easier for them to join when you approach them, or ideally they come to you directly. Number 4 is potential clients. So again, people that hear about you, that hopefully come to you without you having to go to them, or when you go to them, they've heard about you. And the 5 one, of course, is potential candidates. So have you got a campaign, a strategy for each one of those 5? A lot of them will overlap just naturally. But you really want to make sure that employees, candidates, customers, clients, etc., they see you as someone that they really want to go to, that number one source. And are you leveraging this as the best it can be through referrals, social likes? A quick example here, I was talking to actually a marketing agency owner the other day, so you would have thought they would have known this, but I was sharing my idea with them. So when you do a post and people quite want to get comments, they will comment back. That's great, but actually a like is a buy-in. So if you get 30 likes for your post, you need to go into each one of those likes, see who they are, see what they're about, and that could be an excuse for one of your people to make an approach to them from a sales and BD perspective. So there's actually a huge amount of stuff that I find gets missed, even through social media, from stuff that you've already done. This is not even more cost or more time. It's already stuff that you've done. So final thought for you. Now, I know a lot of you will be either fearful of or worried about what's happening with AI now or in the future. Now, I sit on a bunch of AI tech companies, but not AI talents. You don't have to boo or hiss me. However, I see what's going on in that world, and it's very simple. It can either kill you or it can help you to thrive. So what you want to do about it is have someone dedicated to that, whether that's you or someone else in your company who's particularly interested in technology, and constantly looking out for what's new. And how to utilize it and how to influence people through these tools. But fundamentally, the question I've got here is, what AI value adds do you have? And can you prove they're unbiased? Because the biggest downfall of AI currently is that candidates, and I would say the general public wider, they see it as biased. They're not silly. They can realize what's going on. And it's a big issue in hiring talent, is knowing that the internal algorithms are not leaning left, center, or right based on someone's characteristics. So if you can come up with value adds and you can prove that those tools are unbiased, then that's actually a really good BD and value add opportunity for you to take to your clients. But you need to constantly be looking what's out there, seeing what's best, and find that angle, what works for you. And remember, recruitment doesn't just start here with you when here's a job, go and find someone. It starts here when a company decides to grow and what its strategy for growth is and how many people they're going to hire and who they're going to hire and what they're going to do about it and what does people look like and how to pay them, and then who they go to. Then you get involved. Then what about afterwards when they join? What's their launch and their training and their onboarding program and their development in their company, et cetera, et cetera. It's actually a whole process when you look at talent. So which part of that process can you influence by utilizing the AI tools out there, building a model around that, and then taking that as a solution to these companies before they start thinking about it themselves? So there's a real opportunity here, but you've got to be smart how you think about it. So this is how I like to look at myself. So it's a time to start implementing these ideas. As I said before, it's me with my beer. But if you haven't started these things already, start as soon as possible. Put a program in place. If you have looked at things like some of these things already, look to improve them, then add the other things to it. As I've got here, if you'd like to speak to me one-to-one about your business and its goals and challenges and any of the things I've mentioned, we are going to do a Q&A now, but anything more specific for you, just drop me an email, say hi on LinkedIn, and I will happily set up a one-to-one call for free initially with all of you to have that conversation. So hopefully you've all found it useful. And I believe Simon is going to add a few things for the Q&A now. So please do hang around and hear what people have to say.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alex. Can you hear me now? That's all cool. Yeah. I've got a couple of questions. Gavin Johnson asked a question quite early on. At what level should billings per head be? I guess that depends, on the market, what the rates are. But I remember when I was trying to drive productivity into my teams, we were looking to say, well, if you're doing 125, revenue or NFI a year on perm, what's your potential? Could we get you to 200? And so we would look at it over a stage period. Can we get you to 200 next year, or 175 at least, and then maybe 225 the next year? What is a good benchmark for a perm recruiter? I think we should choose a niche market because we're focusing on niche. as following your advice. What is a good benchmark for a
Yeah.
recruiter with 3 or 4 years experience?
Yeah, okay. And I don't want to sound harsh on people who've got 3 to 4 years experience and perhaps aren't hitting these figures and think, oh my God, I'm failing, because that's not the case. It just may be that you haven't
Yeah,
been given the additional knowledge and skills to be able to get to a higher billing. So the simple answer is a little bit how long's a piece of string, because obviously some of the people that I'm mentoring are delivering some quite significant numbers within those periods of time that you've just given. But I would say as a rough guideline, if anyone was doing consistently 2 to 300 after say 3 years, you'd say that's pretty good. And industry wide, the average is probably about 180, maybe even 150, a bit lower, dependent on the market you're in and obviously the size of the individual invoices. So that can have a big difference. If you're doing, £2,000 invoices, then you've got to do a lot of deals. And if you're doing £50,000 invoices, obviously it's different. But I would say that if you're doing 200,000 north, you're doing a reasonable job, and you should be relatively satisfied. But that doesn't mean if you want to, you couldn't do 400 or 500, and there are definitely things you could do. And the track record is that I've helped stacks of people go through those numbers.
yeah. You had a really key thing about driving revenue. And if people are thinking, if they're looking at the average fee, so the average fee was, ours used to be at principal people £7,000 or
Yeah,
£6,000. My focus was, if we could get this to 10,000, that would, as the average fee, that would make a significant difference
yeah,
to everyone's productivity. It's the same amount of work, but for more
yeah,
revenue. Any
absolutely.
any tips and guidance for really driving revenue? The average fees up, or the
Yeah.
and getting more out of existing clients, potential clients.
Yeah, of course. There's a few quick wins I can think of straight away. The first one is make sure everyone is brilliant negotiators. Too often people will just throw away profit because it's easy to get a deal done just because the clients asked for it, and so they've just said, "Yeah, no problem," because they just want the deal.
Mm.
Particularly if they're struggling, particularly if there are not enough jobs on, or it's a tougher market. You're more likely to do that. Whereas actually, the ability to negotiate, to stand strong, to get something in return, to me, that's instant profit that you're throwing away there, or not throwing away if you do it. Then you can do things such as retainers, obviously guaranteeing the income. So as I said before, on a contingent recruiters, it means you're not missing out on your time. So if you look at 100% of my time over a month, if 75% of that is wasted because I'm not filling those jobs, then that's a huge amount of time cost that I've lost there. If I can readdress that a little bit, get more retainers, even mini retainers, then that means that my yield will go up as a
Yeah,
recruiter. Obviously, moving up the food chain, so more senior jobs can be a way of doing it. Possibly looking at other niches and verticals that are close to what you do. Maybe they pay slightly more than the one that you're currently in. And it could be even international markets. So if you
yeah,
go to international markets, some in the US, probably lots of people know. Lots of people have kind of gone that way. You can do it from the UK. Bigger salaries, typically 2 months notice, 2 weeks notice period. So you get great for cash flow perspective as well. So there's just a few quick wins off the cuff.
yeah. You've answered one of my other questions already, actually. So
Mhm.
with that answer, um, a couple of points. You talked about having data and measurement. A question I have: what key measurables are vital for your data
Yeah.
room or KPIs? As something that, so that you know that you're getting good performance out of your team, and you're moving you're moving the business forward. Any sort of must-haves that are 3 or 4 points in that area?
Yeah, I think there's three parts to that. There's one which is, by having the plan, reverse engineering it, knowing what your average fees are, tells you what. So let's say I want to get to £1 million profit. To do that, I need to do £4 million of NFI, gross profit, etc. So to do that, I know my average fee is £10,000. So I know I need to make X number of placements, and then I know my fill ratio is 1 in 4, and I work got back from that. Now I know by each individual recruiter what they need to do. Now, of course, when you get really sophisticated, you can do it by recruiter, because I might have 1 day's experience, you might have 10 years experience. My ratios are not going to be the same as you. So you have a generic ratio across the business, but an individual ratio which you use for management. And your job is obviously to improve those ratios as much as possible. So for me, they're the critical starting points. But if you ask me in terms of what are the activities, so some people could call them KPIs. By the way, I hate the term KPIs.
Yeah,
I think they've got
I
negative
agree.
connotations. I think people see it as Big
Yeah,
Brother. I use the word core activities or words. So what are the core activities you need to do to be successful in your job? So if I know that I need to do X every week and Y every week, that gets me to Z, which is my revenue target, then I will take that, I will build in some headroom, and I will focus on delivering those activities. If I break those down onto a daily basis, it's now super simple to be ahead of them, because I just know each day I need to do A, B, and C. As a founder of a company, I cannot believe that there are business owners out there that don't walk into the company or walk into the company and don't know the ratios for every single person in their business, individualized, because what they should do is to go, I know if you do this and you do this and you do this and you do this, we do this. So obviously every company will be slightly different in terms of what those ratios are. It's a critical component of what they need to do, but I call them tier 1 metrics, tier 2 metrics. Tier 1 are the nearest things to the invoice. So it's new jobs on, and obviously the quality of those jobs. And I might split that between retained and contingent, but new jobs on and first round interviews. That's it. That's tier 1. Forget
yeah,
everything else. Everything else is management KPIs, core activities. Now, I'm not saying forget it as in don't measure it, don't do it. What I'm saying is that it's not as important as these. So things like how long you've been at a call time on a call. I don't care if you've been on a call for 40 days or 4 minutes. I care about the outcome. So who cares? It's how it's, you might know that if you do 5 visits, you get 1 job. Great. Well, that's a good tier 2 metric. Measure it. You need to know. Try and improve it. But there are other tier 2 metrics. I call them training metrics, management metrics. The tier 1 for me, very high level. I want to know first round interviews, new jobs on, based on moving it up, how many I need to do to get to my £1 million profit.
excellent. No, that's really good. Um, just moving towards confirm revenue and guaranteed revenue. Do
Yeah.
you can small agencies adopt some micro RPO models? Have you seen successes in that space? Because I've
Yeah.
seen a few of our members have tried it. Some have failed, but some have done a really good job. And I just wondered if that's something that you guide people with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could do it as a solo entrepreneur.
Yeah,
It's not necessarily about your resource, though obviously it is an element about your resource. You've got to have enough people to fulfill on the jobs. But in theory, you could be a solo entrepreneur. You could have a client who hires 10 people a year under the basis I gave before, so I won't go through all the details of that example. And that person can then go, great, well, I will do this for you. I'll constantly pipeline network. I'll send you my best people, blah, 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 all those fundamentals of the process, and then go and deliver it against it. The subscription model still works because the company still saves money, and they still get you as the expert recruiter in their space. You must be an expert, otherwise why would you set up in that space? Who's then constantly working for them, trying to find the best people in the market and sending them the best people. So in theory, you could do it in one. Now, the more resource you've got, the more you can scale that up. And typically what I find is once you've got your foot through the door, clients tend to overhire rather than underhire. So if anything, they end up spending more money with you than less. And if they do underhire, there are things you can do to put in place mechanisms that mean the client's protected and they're happy, but you still get guaranteed revenue, which
yeah.
again, if anyone wants to speak with me one-to-one about, I can have another conversation.
That's really good. I'm going to ask that. I was going to ask the next question, which you've sort of already answered in some ways. Are many of your clients looking abroad for expansion and higher revenues and fees?
Yeah.
You mentioned the US before, but I just wonder if there's any other markets that you've seen that are UK friendly, that embrace some of the good processes that we put into our recruitment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, It will really depend on your niche, clearly, because there's no point going to a certain part of the world where it's just there's no one there, there's no
Yeah.
companies, it's
Yeah.
not relevant. But I'll just use US as an example at the moment because it's a very popular one, and obviously the language isn't an issue, and you can recruit from here. You don't have to set up an Inc unless you're going to go over there. So there's lots. It's got a low barrier to entry. And even though you might think it's quite a sophisticated market, it's not really. It's very disparate. There's a lot of very small 1 and 2 person operators in the US,
Yeah.
and it's surprisingly few, and it's less saturated than the UK market because it's so vast. Whereas the UK is obviously quite small, very sophisticated recruitment market, and it is very saturated. Better salaries and all the things I said before. So for me, the first place I'd look would be East Coast because of time difference. I would do all my research. I'd find out there. I'd split test it, never go 100% into something else without trying it first. I'd split test my time. I'd do the mornings UK, afternoons US because of the time zones. And I'd work that market. I'd give myself 3 months. I'd have specific objectives I wanted to achieve. So at the end of that, I can make an objective decision about whether it's the right market for me or not.
That's really cool. And anyone's interested in the US, last week we did a recorded session with PGC Workwell, and they're giving
Okay.
some free training on those markets. So contact us if you didn't see that, and there's a recorded session on Team Hub for all team members. Going back to the value of contract, you might recall. That when I bought Principal People, it was 100% perm, and I think it was you might have been the first person that said, Simon, you need to get some contract into that business if you want real value. What's a good any tips for kicking off a contract business, and what sort of percentage gets you real value of if you're coming from perm and you're adding contract, what do you need in terms of percentage to really sort of give it a kicker in terms of value?
Yeah, look, the obvious thing with contract is that it builds up. Once it builds up, it's great. You know, it's there. It's that residual income. It's coming in every single month. So at the start, you know, if you've got a 10 grand fee, you're not going to get a 10 grand fee straight away on a contractor. But if you get 10 contractors, all of a sudden you might start getting to a 10 grand fee. So it takes a bit of time. So you need to be dedicated to it. You need to have someone who knows what they're doing because contract recruitment is different to perm recruitment, albeit when I'm talking to people, I say perm need to be more like contract and work faster. Contract need to be more like perm and be a bit more detailed and actually get the kind of perfect recruiter. So I would say that in the UK market, specifically, you're probably looking around about 15% margins on a lot of contract stuff. Some it's less than that, but don't go into single digit unless it's a massive account and you've got some really good reasons for it. And obviously start at 20-25% and see where you get to. But I'd say 15% is probably more typical UK. If you're going into US market or other markets, then you know, sky's the limit. You can then go a lot bigger, a lot higher. And there are some markets in the UK which are a lot higher than 15% as well. So it really will depend on the niche. And the critical thing is low-hanging fruit. So start with existing clients, do the research, find out who's hires contractors, and then of course the real key is talking to contract candidates. So just get onto the job boards, talk to hundreds of. You'll find out where the contract hires are. And then at least that means you're more targeted and more efficient with your time. Then, of course, there's loads of BD approaches, which we haven't got time to do now. I mean, I do BD sessions with my £1 million billers, so we kind of know what's best in the current market to go into these sorts of things.
Cool. Well, Alex, we're nearly at an hour, and that's been amazing. Lots of stuff to take away there. Brilliant guidance. You've got contact details, all attendees to pick up with Alex and have that one-to-one he's offered. If I was still in recruitment, I'd be doing that again with you, Alex. It's really great guidance for adding value. If you're looking to an event in further down the line, but also just simply if you're building value in your business and expanding your business for growth. Really good tips there. Thank you very much. Great to have you back supporting team. And
my pleasure. Great to be here.
Really good. And folks, I hope you've enjoyed today. Give us some feedback directly at team and directly to Alex too. Thank you very much.
Cheers, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.